Well, hello and welcome to this webinar presented by the Beyond Earth Institute. I'm Steve Wolf. I'm the president and co-founder of Beyond Earth. And today we're going to take a look at what we might expect and what we might hope from the Biden administration as far as space policy and as it relates to our developing and building communities beyond Earth. We'll have, will the strides that were made in the previous administration hold up? Will they be improved upon? May we see some, might we see some setbacks? We have an incredible panel of folks that are going to be discussing that, and I'm going to let the moderator introduce those folks. But before we begin, a little bit about the Beyond Earth Institute. We were established last year to serve as a space policy think tank. And then with the expressed focus on issues, both national and international, that will enable the creation of permanent communities beyond Earth as soon as possible. So if you notice, I use the term communities beyond Earth, and what do we really mean by that? We are trying to change the language a bit here. So we're familiar with space colonies and space settlement. And these are historically challenging terms. So as we look to a positive future in space, we think that communities beyond Earth is a better term and invite you to use that term and adopt that term as well. Beyond Earth, we're very often asked, why are you spending the time now to focus on these communities beyond Earth? There's so much going on in the world. There's so much going on in the space arena right now. Why are we looking so far down the road? Well, I think, on the one hand, we have guys like Elon Musk, who's not waiting for anyone. He's claiming that within 10 or 20 years, he's going to be establishing a colony on Mars. And he may do that, but I think there's a bigger question for us. And I think the reasons why we feel it's imperative kind of comes down to three areas, and you may share one or more of these ideas. First, the fact is no seafaring vessel sets sail without having a lifeboat, right? We understand that concept. And as much as we want to keep this Earth and preserve it for infinity, we know that there are real risks. I mean, you ask anyone on the street, they can name 6 existential risks that are facing our world right now. And so it's a matter of planetary protection. Establishing communities beyond Earth is simply a matter of ensuring our survival. Or then there's, of course, the reason of abundance and economic vitality for all. So even if we were to access a tiny fraction of the resources that are in the solar system and put them to the task of enriching our world, we would be able to restore this planet to an oasis, a garden in the vastness of space. And through, assuming that there's proper governance, there will be wealth for all folks, those who decide to live in space and those who decide to remain on Earth. So it is a matter of economic abundance, which is a reason. And then there is another reason that is really close to me. It is this idea that we expand into space because it is part of our DNA. There is an underlying evolutionary impulse that is driving us to do so. It is literally the same impulse that allowed the human race 50,000 years ago to migrate to every corner of the planet. And now in this age, we are looking towards the stars and we are looking to expand ourselves in that way. And we feel simply drawn to that. And I personally tend to connect with the evolutionary impulse. You may feel drawn to the notion of planetary protection or survival of the race, or this huge economic potential and boom in the future. Regardless, whatever the motivation is, this really is the time to move decisively to create the legal and policy framework that will allow communities beyond Earth to become a reality. If you feel the way that I feel and my co-founders feel about this idea, we ask you to join Beyond Earth as donors, as contributors, as volunteers, as partners, however you see fit. Please let us know. Actually, email me directly. So I'm steve@beyondearth.org, and I'd love to receive an email from you. Now, we're going to come back down to earth, because now we are going to talk about the nuts and bolts of the administration, about policy, and that's where Beyond Earth lives, right? And we're going to, just one second here. I do want to mention first that this is our fourth webinar. We have, we started back in June with Mike Gold. We are setting for ourselves the goal of doing a webinar a month. Next month, we will be focusing on in-space infrastructure development, key element in developing capability for developing communities beyond Earth. Stay tuned for that. And so today's topic is, will the Biden-Harris administration bring us closer to communities beyond Earth? Moderating this awesome panel and is Tony DeTora. You'll be introducing our panel. Tony is a Beyond Earth co-founder and vice president for government relations for Link Global Inc. Prior to that, he was the senior professional staff of the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology in the House, and he was also the senior advisor to the former Congressman Dana Rohrabacher. And with that introduction, Tony, take it away. Really look forward to your conversation, and can't wait. Go ahead.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. That was a very nice introduction, and you're right. The panel is really extraordinary today. So I'm going to get right to the introductions. First, I'll introduce Charity Weeden. Charity is Vice President of Global Space Policy at Astroscale US, coordinating and synchronizing Astroscale's global policy efforts towards space flight safety and long-term space sustainability. Lots of S's in there. She also serves as chair of the FAA's Commercial Space Transportation Advisory Committee, ComStack. Charity is a 23-year veteran of the Royal Canadian Air Force, previous senior director of policy at the Satellite Industry Association, and a business owner. Charity, welcome.
Thank you, Tony.
And now I'll add Greg Autry. Greg is chair of the Safety Working Group on ComStack at the FAA. He has researched and taught technology entrepreneurship at UC Irvine, USC, and ISU Florida Tech. Dr. Autry served on the 2016 NASA agency review team and as White House liaison at NASA. He was nominated for NASA CFO in 2020, though the Senate failed to vote on his nomination. He publishes in peer-reviewed journals and major outlets, including Foreign Policy, Forbes, and Space News, most recently yesterday. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here. Great.
All right. And finally, we have Jim Muncy. Jim is president and founder of Polyspace, an independent space policy consultancy that helps space entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs succeed at the nexus of space, business, technology, and public affairs. Jim served as professional staff on the House Science Committee and as Rep. Dana Rohrabacher's lead space policy staff, something we hold in common. He worked as a policy assistant in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy under President Reagan, began his work in space policy in 1981 as a staff advisor to Representative Newt Gingrich, where he helped found the Congressional Space Caucus. A longtime leader in space advocacy community, Muncy co-founded the Space Frontier Foundation and is a frequent speaker and writer on space policy issues. Jim, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so what will America's national space policy look like under a Biden-Harris administration? We at Beyond Earth are working toward policies to lead to economically vibrant communities of people living and working beyond planet Earth, communities beyond Earth. Are there any specific policy changes you expect from the new administration or that you would recommend to the new administration to bring about that goal more quickly? A few of the questions we asked in our write-up: will Artemis be abandoned altogether? What of the Artemis Accords and our relationships with other nations in space? And can the vibrant and burgeoning commercial space sector expect the same support it received during the Trump and Obama administrations? So Charity, why don't we start with you? And what would you recommend to the new administration or expect from them as we move forward?
Thank you, Tony. First, I want to thank the Beyond Earth Institute for inviting me here today. To be honest, I had not heard of the Institute, and so I'm grateful to Greg and Steve for introducing me to this group as well. So thank you. So it's always dangerous to look into a crystal ball like that with such questions, but there are some maxims that we can take and project forward. Space, by and large, is still bipartisan, and that's a good thing, and we should aim to continue that bipartisanship. Previous administrations, they saw advancements across commercial, national security, and civil space efforts, not just in the last 4 years, but over the last decade. There is momentum here. So that maximum of leadership in the U.S., innovation, and international cooperation, I think those are critical things to continue. But when we want to be ambitious and innovative, you need to match that ambition or those ambitious goals with modern concepts. So space missions 6 decades ago, they didn't start with sustainability in mind. But today we have to change that mindset into sustaining not just policies across administrations, not just economic sustainability, so it's affordable to use space products and services, but the environmental sustainability that's required to have a modern space architecture and help us move further beyond Earth. So highlights we're seeing so far from a Biden administration, right off the bat, today is Climate Day, where there are executive orders being announced on climate change to battle climate change. There are lessons here that we can take to ensure humanity and the biosphere and resources thrive both on planet Earth and off planet Earth. What can we do here? The health of humans is on everyone's mind, especially mine, as my kids are learning from our house. Where are the lessons there to keep communities off Earth healthy and vibrant as well? And finally, international cooperation. Complex and ambitious goals are very difficult to achieve with one nation only. And the US does recognize this, certainly in national security contexts with the inclusion of close allies and partners in the CSPOC. NASA can see this with the Artemis missions and Artemis Accords. United Nations in a couple of years ago outlined long-term sustainability guidelines. So international cooperation, I hope, is a theme in this new administration as well. And I'll just pause there. Thank you.
Wow, great. All right, thank you for that very thoughtful response there. Greg, let's turn to you. So Charity brought up some very interesting points, particularly with regard to the climate and sustainability. One of the key questions that we have about moving forward is international cooperation and whether or not Artemis will be abandoned altogether, whether the date will be pushed out. I think there's some skepticism that the 2024 date was achievable to begin with. But why don't you talk to our broader question, and if you have any thoughts on that particular date. Greg, you're on mute. I think you have to unmute yourself. So, great.
Okay, Doug Lavero's countdown pen aside, I do think that we are going to the moon. We are getting there, and we're going on to Mars. I am confident that's going to happen. I don't have any direct insights to whatever the current transition team reported, but I've gone through the experience before. I know some of the individuals on the team and their reputations, and I've talked to a lot of people, who've spoken to them, and I've spoken, informally. I don't sense, and this is nothing official, I don't sense any desire to make any 180-degree U-turns. I think any discussion that Artemis might be discontinued is unfounded. We shouldn't probably even say that. At least we put it into somebody's head that that's an option. So I'm not worried about that. On the international standpoint, I think that amazing work has been done, and Administrator Bridenstine and Mike Gold deserve credit for bringing countries like Italy on board, who I believe otherwise would have been very inclined perhaps to sign up on a Chinese space station instead of an American lunar program. And they're putting real resources in. I mean, we're talking nearly €1 billion. The Japanese are putting real resources in. Canada signed on. Brazil is almost signed on. It's going really well. I can't imagine that the Biden administration wouldn't see that as a positive. I don't think that's anything that they would want to derail. And it's always smart, frankly, with any program that might face cancellation to tie in international partners, because that makes it harder for the Senate or anybody else to back off of it, because they're going to offend these countries they have to work with in so many other contexts. I also get people saying, maybe there'll be budgetary pressure that might cause them to cancel the program. But, I pointed this out many times. The NASA budget, when George H.W. Bush left office, was 1% of federal spending. When my team came in 2016, it was 0.42%. It's gotten the first actual inflation-adjusted increases to the budget in 30 years, but the budget itself has grown so much that NASA hasn't grown as a percentage of the budget. Cutting out a NASA program does not help you with the F-35. The cost overrun on the F-35 is $180 billion. It's like multiple times the NASA budget. We're not talking the planes, just the overrun. So I'm not concerned there. I think it'll continue forward. I think it's positive, and everybody that I've heard from the Biden side seems positively engaged. I agree with Charity. They're going to get serious about climate change and upper sciences. I'm on board with that. They're going to want to restore the STEM education budget. I suspect that's something the Senate wants to do anyway, and was pretty well sticking back in. So I'm positive on where I think we're likely to go.
Okay. All right, let's ask Jim to weigh in on this question. So specific policy changes you'd expect from the new administration, Jim?
I agree with both Charity and Greg about the important pioneering work that Mike Gold and Administrator Bridenstine did with the Artemis Accords. But I think it's going to be important, and I hope that the new administration recognizes the value of diversity in not just among nations and national governments participating in Artemis and the space, humanity's migration into space generally, but also individuals and enterprises from other nations as well. We are seeing a really very gratifying amount of attention being given to entrepreneurial space in both European and Japanese industries and elsewhere. I mean, Astroscale is a great example of that. And I think bringing entrepreneurs from other countries into the marketplace and having them fully participate and guide space policy will be vital, so that it's not just an economically vibrant, but it's a socially vibrant and politically vibrant coalition, as it were, that is working to build out better, as it were, into the solar system.
Okay, very interesting. So one of the things that we talked about briefly yesterday was about commercial innovation and how it is speeding up. Charity, you were talking about that. I know your role in ComStack, you see that very closely, not to mention your job at Astroscale, the innovation y'all are bringing. So can you talk a little bit about how that's going to speed up the ability of communities beyond Earth, and whether or not the new administration will continue to be supportive of that, and how they can continue to be supportive of that?
Sure. The train has left the station when it comes to commercial opportunities and entrepreneurship in space. And, you're seeing everything from commercial lunar missions, cislunar SSA, debris removal, on-orbit servicing. All these new activities and services are moving faster than maybe the regulatory and policy framework can handle. And so I think that's a challenge unto its own. But it's also an opportunity to leverage all this great innovation, both for the government to be a customer of it, but also to encourage it. So I would say that commercial innovation is continuing and accelerating. There's very little to halt that unless economically we can't get out of the COVID economic crisis aftermath, if you will. But it's encouraging to see continued investment in these new technologies and services, and we need to see that incorporated into both policies and regulation.
Okay, very good. Either of our other two panelists like to weigh in on this question? Or Greg, let's go to you.
Yeah, regarding entrepreneurship, it's what I study, and I totally concur with Jim that the international component's important. But the international component's already here, and that is so interesting. And it also speaks to Charity's comments about the government struggling to deal with this. Charity and I are knee deep in that on the ComStack, and I'm so excited that she's here with me. But what I see is that foreign companies have chosen to come to the United States to locate their startups here and manufacture and operate. This does not happen in any other industry. In every other industry, American companies are trying to get out of the United States and offshore their production and even their R&D. In this case, you've got Rocket Lab from New Zealand. You've got Virgin from the UK, whose money comes from the UAE. You've got the Ukrainian-backed folks at Firefly in Austin, Texas, and you've obviously got Russian-backed Momentus. There are some challenges to some of these investments, but the point is foreign money and companies and really bright and aggressive entrepreneurs are coming here to do their business because we have a regulatory environment that works and because we've had a whole of government approach that's been coherent. This was established all the way back in the Reagan administration when FAAST got set up. And in the last administration, I think the fact that we had a Wilbur Ross in Commerce and a Mike Pence who really cared about space, made a great impact. I'm hoping the new administration will continue the National Space Council structure. I've heard some rumors of some really great people who might be considered to follow up on the amazing job Scott Pace did. But it's super important to make sure that the regulatory environment attracts those companies we can work with them, as well as companies that stay in Japan or Luxembourg or wherever.
Sure.
And I just want to, Tony, just highlight, the great job that the Office of Space Commerce and Department of Commerce has done. Kevin O'Connell having just departed that office, they've done a stellar job in advocating for commercial space opportunities here in the U.S. So just wanted to make sure that point was made.
Okay, very good. And so that brings up a good question. Would we expect to see the Biden-Harris administration keep the National Space Council? Would we expect them to revisit decisions about what role commerce should play versus transportation? And will they reconsider the Space Force? Jim, you want to weigh in on that?
I think everyone has been very impressed with what the Space Council was able to achieve over the past 3.5 years. I think that there's an appropriate need to take another look at the idea of a user advisory group and whether or not we might want to have more users and fewer providers on a group named for users. But the council itself is a good idea. The question is who's going to chair it? Vice President Pence had a personal interest in space going back to his first days in Congress. and obviously was a very good fit for that topic and brought a lot of credibility to the issue. The question, I don't know that Vice President Harris has the same interest. So I don't know whether it might be the president, it might be the science advisor, it might be someone else. But it's really important, as Greg was talking about, it's really important that we have a whole of government approach to space, that we not let space become, just as we don't want it to be an active zone of combat internationally, we would rather it not become a bureaucratic, fratricidal scape of bureaucracies trying to attack each other's ideas. We need all of the agencies that have a role to play in space to be pulling together and looking for ways to solve problems for scientists, for commercial users, and for civil users, for civil government sponsored users. So hopefully that idea of a whole of government approach and an activist National Space Council that really does pull all the different disparate interests together, hopefully will survive and will continue, perhaps in a somewhat new form.
Okay. So, Charity, do you have any insight into the transportation versus commerce split that kind of took place, and then clearer lines were drawn recently? But
sure. Just if I may go back to the National Space Council question as well. So I feel that the space community is going to have more interagency decisional making than less in the future. And so a body that can, cross that interagency and help make decisions is helpful. And I think we also need to think through why the National Space Council itself was very popular and effective the last 3.5 years. Industry, I get the sense, very much liked it. And why is that? Well, I feel some of that is transparency in the decision-making process and the ability to see the opinions of the interagency there. Also, the top cover, if you will, the importance, the level importance through the vice president. However, the OSTP is now a cabinet position, and that is positive as well to see science take such a central role in this administration. So to be determined. I don't have any insight in the future of the National Space Council, but just kind of want to go back and say, why was it effective here? When it comes to decisions between one department or the other, I assume you're talking about space traffic management. This is both an administrative issue, but also a congressional issue that is still being debated. So, certainly the last administration wanted Department of Commerce to take the space traffic management mission, and there was funding at the end of the day for that. So I don't have a crystal ball on that, but definitely am tracking this really, really important issue of space traffic management very closely. We don't have time to wait. We need to have some urgency in setting up a system where we can keep space safe.
Okay, very good. So, Greg, you have thoughts on those questions?
Yeah, I echo what Charity said. I am concerned that there's no obvious person in the higher levels of the administration that is a Star Trek or NASA fan, but I do think the general focus on science is extremely positive. There's a moon rock in the Oval Office, apparently at the request of the president, and that is a great sign. So, who it will be, I don't know. I think, like Charity said, they should do it, and we all need to get out there and make sure they understand how important it is, because I could see it falling between the cracks with all the urgent problems that are facing our country today. Because what a transition at this particular moment. You've got so many things going on. I don't even want to list them, but it's obvious that it's easy for something like the Space Council to not get addressed, and it needs to be. So it's incumbent upon us to come together in a bipartisan way and alert the new administration that it was an effective situation and that we all support it.
Okay, great.
If I can jump in for a second,
Please.
I have to offer real plaudits to the Biden-Harris administration for the speed with which they've put forth nominees in a number of areas. I think they are definitely hitting the ground running. And I wouldn't be surprised, whereas, we've heard, certainly typically in the past, we can wait until, May or June to hear about who's the NASA administrator. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't hear about the NASA administrator in the next few weeks. So that's not based on any data I have. That's just, my supposition based on the speed that they seem to be moving. I would also echo Charity's urgency about space situational awareness and space traffic coordination. I would certainly hope that we don't have yet another discussion of what agency should be doing it. I thought it was very salutary that the Committee on Appropriations of the Senate mandated a study by the National Academy of Public Administration looking at just that very question. And they came back with a strong endorsement of Commerce as the right place to do this. And Commerce has already been, setting up a lot of initial steps on that. And while I think it's unfortunate that we've lost Kevin, I think that they have actually a plan in place. They were able to secure an additional $9 or $10 million of budget authority in the omnibus. So they're hitting the ground running and doing things. And hopefully, because of the importance of sustainability, the importance of safety, the importance of figuring out, what all of these satellites are doing and what all the debris that's up there already is doing. It's really vital that we just go forward and implement the transition that's already started. Commerce has done a great job of already talking to governments all over the world about sharing of space situational awareness data with them to take up that role as well, so that we're notifying space agencies internationally as well as various commercial users domestically of when they have to move a satellite or something like that. So, I say let's just go and do it. Let's not have any more debates, please.
All right. Very good. So did you just want to end the debates? I like it. All right.
Well,
So,
that
Jim,
debate. I mean, there's plenty more debates we can have, but I think that debate is solved.
very good. So, Jim, you and I previously talked about, you and I have been talking for years and years about there's a goal is perfect one way or the other, but if you do it the wrong way, then you're not going to get the benefits out of it. And if you do it the right way, then you can. And I think I'm hearing everybody say that Artemis isn't going to be abandoned. The date might be pushed out, which would be reasonable, especially with the lack of funding that was provided by Congress. But how do you move forward and do Artemis in a way that is more sustainable and actually leads to a communities beyond Earth infrastructure possibility?
Well, this is where I think the new administration's commitment to diversity and inclusion and economic opportunity, particularly for communities that have not fully participated in governmental space activities in the past, could really play a major role. Entrepreneurial space is just naturally more open and I don't want to say non-discriminatory because I don't think anyone is being discriminatory with regards to race or other social issues, because it's not acceptable. But I think there's a real commitment to inclusion within the entrepreneurial space community, and there are opportunities for people from non-traditional backgrounds to start businesses and start companies and start doing things, and provide leadership in the community that may not happen quite as quickly through more establishment aerospace corporate structures. And I would hope that what we could see is that the goal for Artemis is not to land the first woman and the next man on the surface of the moon, but to land 1,000 people on the surface of the moon. We're going to the moon for a set of reasons. And really the question is, what are all of those reasons? And is the right approach to basically have a program series of people who are the best and the brightest go to the moon and carry out some top-down planned program of research? Or should we open up the moon so that scientists of all backgrounds and communities can go, and engineers and entrepreneurs go to the surface of the moon and do whatever productive, creative people do, and hopefully, learn what we need to learn before we go to Mars, and also learn what we can do on the moon that benefits people on the Earth. And if desirable and possible, learn what we can do to stay on the moon and in fact build a community beyond the Earth on the moon. So all of those things, I think would benefit from a more decentralized, more democratizing approach that entrepreneurship naturally lends itself to. So and that's just that's the way I see space, and hopefully that sort of vision would appeal to the administration's real commitment to inclusion and diversity and those sorts of things.
Okay, very good. I'd like to get Charity's you to weigh in on this, and then Greg, you as well, specifically about Artemis and leading communities beyond Earth and the sustainability question.
Yeah, I want to go back to the term and what Administrator Bridenstine liked to say, going back to the moon sustainably. And it's really important to think through what this word really means. Perhaps he was talking about politically sustainability, so crossing over administration to administration, Congress to Congress. But equally important are two other elements, and that is economic sustainability. And this means encouraging and investing in commercial opportunities on the way beyond planet Earth. So the on-orbit servicing, commercial landers, this is all good, but we have to sustain this as well. So we have to make it an economical, sustaining practice to go back to the moon and back and forth. And then, of course, the third item that I will unapologetically talk about is environmental sustainability. Unfortunately, wherever humankind has gone, we've left a mess. And I'm also concerned about the lunar environment and orbits. Should we have a robust activities around the moon? So where are the rules? How do we set up a rules-based structure, norm structure? The Artemis Accords has some language within that might support building of rules around the moon for environmental sustainability, whether it's on the surface or in orbit. And of course, how do we build out sustainability guidelines, but rules and regulations here in Earth orbit that we can continue to use and move forward. So 3 different kind of modes of sustainability. They're all very important to the beyond Earth concept.
Very good. And then Greg, you've written articles about how space can help us with our environmentalism, but I'm interested in your input in that and the other aspects that Charity just mentioned.
Sure. And if I might do a quick plug, you've got my Twitter handle there. So if you would follow me on Twitter and check out my column at Forbes, I'll post the the other environmental ones. So sustainability is an interesting word because most folks, and I think in this administration in particular, are going to go to the environmental component of it. And space offers huge advantages to Earth-based sustainability by allowing us, as Jeff Bezos is advocating, to move resource extraction and manufacturing off the Earth and stop damaging our planet, every day of the week. Solar power from space can help us get around the problem that solar power on the Earth has with nighttime and winter, clouds and such that make it impractical for a complete solution. But economic sustainability means, as Charity mentioned, that big companies can afford to do this when the government pulls out of the program eventually and moves on to Mars and further destinations, which is the appropriate role of government to help go break new ground. In order to have a sustainable presence with Jim's thousands of people or even 10 people on the moon, we've got to have more than one flight system to get there. And that means full redundancy from the rocket, from the transportation capsule to the lander and ascent vehicle. And right now we're on our way to that. We've got an amazing livery of rockets coming from the SLS system to the Falcon Heavy to Starship that Elon's working on, and what's emerging from Blue Origin with New Glenn and a bunch of other companies that are going to let us get to orbit, get to the moon. That's really important to be able to do that, because we learned with the shuttle that system fails, and we were down for 3 years both times, right? Well, we had committees and recriminations looking at each other and engineering redesigns, and if we didn't have the Russians, the space station would have had to been abandoned, right? So we've got to have that redundancy on the moon too. We cannot put people on the surface of the moon and have only one way to get them off. That's not acceptable. So from day one, we want that. Plus, it provides competition, which usually is what makes economies work, by bringing and forcing new ideas and technologies in and driving prices down.
All right, very interesting. All right, we're going to go to some of these comments and questions that have been coming in. So there's a question about climate policy, and it says satellites help monitor climate change. And I think we all know that that's true. But what are some of the other ways that space assets help us here on Earth, and that we could expect to see more focus on or more interest in the coming years?
I would point out the Montreal Protocol, which helped resolve the issue we had with an existential threat to the Earth by the depletion of the ozone layer from chlorofluorocarbons that we figured out back in the 70s with NASA technology, right? And that led to the first international agreement to solve a global environmental problem. Without NASA, I don't know what we'd know about that, and I doubt we'd know very much about climate change if we didn't have NASA and NOAA satellite assets out there. So it's absolutely critical to doing the right thing by our planet.
Fair enough.
Just want to echo Greg's comment there. So remote sensing is vital. Communicating is vital, and these services come from space. Position, navigation, timing. It's really important for all of us. It's incumbent on us to explain simply and effectively to the public why space matters to them. And climate change, as an example, is one of those items. You can also see patterns of migration of humans and animals as resources are strained. So resource monitoring is critical here as well. And of course, from space, you can now monitor emissions as well. So there's a lot that can be done from space-based assets, and that's why they're so critical in this debate.
Okay, very good. So on here, it says Doug Plata put up that he understood the White House website just took down the space policy directives. I believe that's just standard protocol. The White House takes down everything from the previous administration. I remember the hue and cry 4 years ago when the Trump administration was doing the same to that. They archive it someplace else. But I do believe that all the policy directives remain in force until overwritten or rescinded. And so that's just good. If anybody has a comment on that, or nope. Okay. And then there's a mention here about Pam Melroy, who was not only on the transition team, but is one of the folks people are expecting to be on the short list for NASA administrator. So could she become the overall space champion? And anybody know her views on communities beyond Earth? No?
I say I'm a Melrose fan. I think you couldn't pick somebody with a broader list of capabilities, from having worked in industry to being an astronaut, to understanding the military, the corporate, and having worked at FAAST and understand the regulatory side. There are few people that have that breadth. So I have to say, I think that would be a good choice for the short list.
Agree.
Certainly for NASA, not in any way minimizing Pam's abilities, but I hope that we'll have someone from either the White House or otherwise out of sort of the operational agencies leading space policy as a whole for the administration. When when I had the opportunity to meet at that point nominee for Vice President Mike Pence a week before the election in 2016, and he talked about space and NASA almost synonymously. And of course, he knew that military space was an important area. But I stressed to him the importance of the role of all these different federal agencies that are involved, not just in commercial space, but in civil space. NOAA's role as the weather predictor and operational remote sensing agency, transportation and its role in the use of GPS for the economy, particularly for making transportation more efficient. There's a huge green impact right there from space systems. So I think he came away from that that conversation understanding that space really does touch every aspect of our both our personal lives and in many ways every element of government. So in many ways, space is really a whole of government topic, and that's why hopefully it'll be a whole of government leadership type thing.
Okay.
And if they want to make her the czar of space, that would be great. I mean, or the czarina of space, if that's the appropriate term. But that's, in my view, that's more important than NASA administrator. Obviously, NASA controls $20 billion, and therefore people tend to think of the NASA administrator as being awfully important.
$26 billion in reality.
What?
$26 billion in reality.
Okay, $26 billion. I'm glad we're making progress. But my point is that ideally the person who works to set space policy overall is influencing NASA and NOAA and the National Bureau of Standards and other commerce functions and transportation and and the Space Force and other areas to have an impact on all of them, and all of that federal spending and all of the regulatory policies and promotional activities, etc. That's a big job, and at some point in the future, we may see the job of space czar, or whatever you want to call it, as being more important than the head of the so-called space agency.
It could be a cabinet level position. Yeah, I nominate Jim. I would like to say, Jim mentioned Kevin O'Connell. He would have been great to retain, I think. I do hope the administration would consider some bipartisan appointments in space where I think it makes a lot of sense and there's not a lot of friction, whereas attempting to fulfill that pledge to be bipartisan and inclusive might be harder in other agencies. It's a good place to consider it.
Sure. Okay. So now we're going to get to the question that I warned you we were going to ask, which is, when do you expect to see the first communities beyond Earth? So, Charity, let's start with you.
Oh boy. That's a hard one for me. Just for everyone, your sake, I spend 99% of my time thinking of the Earth orbit environment and inwards. And so I'm starting to, my eyes are opening to external of that, what is happening in cislunar and lunar environment, and then beyond to Mars. What are the plans down there? It's really hard to predict past, say, 5 to 10 years, especially in this fast-paced society where, Moore's law is off the charts now. The top 10 jobs in 10 years haven't been invented yet. So it's what I can tell you is there will be communities beyond Earth in a slower timeline if we keep the status quo of how we use space. And it will be a faster timeline if we improve and advance the way we use space. We are smart about it. We're sustainable, and include those lessons from Earth in our efforts to bring sustainability practices into space. So that's probably as close as you're going to get from me from an answer. Slow if we stay the course, and fast if we smarten up.
All right, I'll just make up a date for you later. Greg, why don't you weigh in? When do you think we'll see the first community beyond Earth?
2000. I'm going to argue that ISS is a community beyond Earth, and I think that that's going to be a model that it's going to continue as people begin to work in space and have the opportunity to go there for extended periods of time. I think you'll see longer and longer and longer stays, particularly if we can get on the surface of the moon, or if we get rotational space stations that solve some of the issues caused by being in microgravity. So I don't know that it'll be easy to pick the hard, fast date. I'm not sure that we're going to do this Roanoke colony and just say, bam, we're putting a colony in. I think we'll start working on the surface of the moon and people will stay longer and longer. But I think that there will be 100 people living and working in space, as Tori Bruno might like to say, by 2050.
Okay, great. And Jim?
You pessimist, you. I'm going to say that a federal government installation does not constitute a community, and that whenever we turn the title to ISS over to some private or international consortium, possibly led by Axiom, possibly led by other companies. When we have that first private outpost in Earth orbit, well within your focus, Charity, of domains, that they will constitute a community beyond the Earth. So if ISS is phased out around 2028 or thereabouts, then we could see a first community by then. The real question for me is if a space vehicle like Starship is operating, the cost per person and the cost per unit mass for a space infrastructure is going to get so cheap. The question is who's going to want to put up a space hotel? Who's going to want to have literally 50 people show up at a time? Who's going to be able to handle 50 people showing up at a time on a Starship to low Earth orbit? There's a market there if you drop down the price per person to $5 million or a little less. That doesn't exist at 55. I mean, there clearly exists a market at 55 because Axiom just announced their first group. But that's the question to me is when do private people own infrastructure, and hopefully multiple private people own infrastructure, so that you have multiple different kinds of people interacting together in a connected facility. That's a community, and that could easily be within the next decade.
All right. Well, great. This has been a great panel. I really appreciate all of you joining us today. Charity, Greg, Jim, you've been wonderful. Thank you very much. If you'd like to take just, I don't know, 30 seconds to say anything else to wrap it up, and then we'll turn it right back over to Steve.
I'll kick it off then. Thanks, Tony. So I guess I would pose a challenge to the Beyond Earth community to help those in politics and those in policy understand why it's important what you're doing and why it's important to have communities beyond Earth. I think that is something that might be missing in the dialogue here today. So I would encourage you to make those connections, connect the dots to the priorities of the current administration and others, and really create that value proposition. We see that clearly, but maybe not everyone else does. So I just want to encourage that sort of dialogue.
Great, thank you. And then Greg?
What she said. I'd like to give one specific example of the benefit to Earth from space that I think is so concrete policymakers can grasp it. The GPS system, as Jim mentioned, it's the #1 environmental system ever developed. It cuts greenhouse gas emissions far more than any other technology that's been developed, because every form of transportation is as much as 15% more fuel efficient. Motorola did a study more than a decade ago on long-haul trucks in the United States that were GPS enabled, and the advantages in their performance. It was $52,000 a year benefit for a truck with GPS in fuel efficiency, reduced insurance, wear and tear, driver time, and mostly in logistics of knowing when the truck would show up at the bay. We've got 1 million of those trucks in the United States. That's $52 billion returned to the U.S. economy from trucks, nothing else. It pays for the entire NASA and military space program on its own. We get our money back from space. We need to, as Charity said, let our policymakers know why space is important, and space settlement is the ultimate manifestation of that.
Okay. And Jim? 30 seconds, Jim.
Just be hopeful. Think about what your dream to be or to do in space is, and help work to stretch that out to a vision where everyone gets to achieve their vision in space. That's what, ideally, that's what a democracy does, is makes it possible for everyone to participate. And I want everyone to participate in our national space and international space endeavors. So.
All right, great. Thank you all. You've been a wonderful panel. Steve?
Yeah, hey everyone. I want to say this has been an extraordinary conversation, and I have to say I really appreciate that, and I think all do. It's very nonpartisan. The issues that we're trying to address here, Charity, really appreciate you reminding us that about the importance of Earth sciences, and I think it's important even as we look to move out into space. We are in no way looking to compete for resources in terms of programmatically with these important Earth science activities. And so we enormously support that. There's so much opportunity for utilizing satellite applications to advance Earth in so many different ways. I appreciate Jim reminding us about the importance of entrepreneurship in this whole endeavor. And Greg, your insights have been tremendous. And Tony, of course, thanks for your leadership in moderating this panel. It's something I just can't do. That's why you're doing it. But I want to make just a couple of announcements. I want to actually first acknowledge that Jim is an advisor to the Beyond Earth Institute, and we appreciate his participation in that way. Greg was an advisor for about, I think, 5 minutes, until we've actually, in conversations, Greg has agreed to become a more active participant in the organization and the strategy and the operations of our efforts. And so we welcome him aboard in that capacity and look forward to his leadership. And just to close this out, we look forward to seeing you back here on the program next month, where we will be addressing the in-space manufacturing, or rather in-space infrastructure development topic, and really encourage you again just to be part of our group. We have a donation button on our homepage. Please do use that. I do want to hear from you if you agree with this particular mission. It is highly focused, and we have a lot of great things planned for this coming year. So thank you all again. Thank you, Tony, Charity, Jim, and Greg, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.